Bless me. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Michael. I am the Red Light Historian. In today's video, I have quite the Halloween treat for you in store. In this video, I will be telling you 3 spooky stories that will surely give you the shivers. They involve cults, aliens, and ghosts. To do this, I will be using our old friend, Lego, to help me tell these terrifying tales. Let's make some history. Before we get started, I just want to say, look how giant this fruit snack is. It's 2 bags in one. That is the real spook of this video. I mean, just look at this Whopper. It's massive. It's like the size of 2. So I did just want to preface before we get into this that I didn't give myself quite enough time to be able to research each story as much as I would have liked. That being said, just take everything I say with a grain of salt. And I mean, it is Halloween, and what's spookier than a bit of misinformation? Let's get into it. Alright guys, we're going to try something a little bit different today. If it goes great, we'll keep it up. If it doesn't go great, then we'll have to go back to the drawing board. Let's get into it. In 1933, Lucinda Mills awoke with her family in their quiet home on the outskirts of Tomahawk, Kentucky. She had been staying with her daughter, who I will refer to as Mrs. Boyd, her daughter's husband, and their 3 daughters. As the morning drew on, Mrs. Boyd and her husband noticed 2 men off in the distance, slowly approaching their house. As the 2 men drew closer, Mrs. Boyd could make out who they were. It was her brother, John Mills, and Lucinda's nephew, Ballard Mills. Both of them were carrying sticks and Bibles, and chanting, as well as shouting weird prayers in an unintelligible language. As John and Ballard continued their approach, Mrs. Boyd noticed that their eyes were closed and that they were stumbling over many rocks and sticks that were in their path. Behind them were their wives, as well as 35 to 40 children. The congregation eventually stopped in front of the Boyd's residence. John took the stick that he was holding and began beating them with it, to test whether or not they were worthy to be a sacrifice to their God. You see, this was a cult known as the Unknown Tongues. John had been in communication with his Lord, and was told that he needed to make 6 sacrifices, which led him to the Boyd residence. At this point, he planned on sacrificing Mrs. Boyd's 3 daughters to their Lord. He had the group that he was with grab the 3 daughters and take them to the altar that was outside the home. Although the 3 girls did believe in God, they had no interest in being a sacrifice. They cried and screamed, pleading to the mob to let them go. However, the mob had no interest in this. That is, except for one person. Their grandmother, Lucinda, snuck in and got them away from the altar, allowing them to be free from the terrors that awaited them. At this point in time, the cult was in a pretty remote part of Kentucky. Regardless of this fact, though, there were still enough neighbors nearby that began to hear the screaming and crying of Mrs. Boyd's children, as well as the loud chanting that was coming from the cult. This made the neighbors a little nervous. Nervous enough where they decided to call the police and have them investigate whatever could be taking place over at the Boyd's residence. Despite this action taken by the neighbors, it was too late. John had already found out that Lucinda had freed the girls from the altar. This sent John into a tailspin of anger and rage. John did not want to anger his Lord any longer and decided to take out his frustrations on the one that freed the sacrifices, his own mother, Lucinda. In his anger, he reached for his mother, grabbed her, and threw her on the altar. He began choking the life out of her and beating her, saying that he was going to drive the devil from her, and began pleading with his God to have his way with Lucinda. Much of the congregation that had traveled with John to the Boyd's residence stood by, watching the grisly scene unfold. watching Lucinda fight for her very life, doing nothing but watching. Watching and speaking in an unknown tongue. Other members of the cult began grabbing firewood and creating a pylon in which to place Lucinda after the ritual was done. As all of this cultic commotion took place, the police finally arrived on the scene. However, when they broke down the door to the altar room, Lucinda had already died. After witnessing John take the life of his dear mother Lucinda, police placed him in handcuffs as well as several of the other cult members and dragged them to prison. Once in jail, John was shackled and left on a cot in the middle of the floor to prevent himself from any self-injury. All the while, he was chanting and moaning in his unknown tongue and screaming that his mother would rise again, free of all sin. As John lay in prison, rumors began to swirl. Police officers, during their investigation, found out that multiple cult members had actually been planning on sacrificing John as well. These cult members were jealous that John could hear God and they couldn't. They believed that if they burned John alive, maybe they too could hear the words of their Lord. In February of 1933, Judge Hardin ordered John to come to court and give his testimony. This was easier said than done, as John believed he could not be judged by any earthly being, and that only his Lord could decide his fate. He fought the police, kicking and screaming the entire time. However, he would not win. Eventually, John did show up to court. He was shackled and placed on a cot in the middle of the floor, screaming and chanting in his unknown tongue the entire time. Attorney Jasper Priest attempted to question John and why he murdered Lucinda, as well as other of the cult's proceedings. However, John wouldn't respond. He would only make strange guttural noises that could not be made out by any human language. The defense argued that John was experiencing temporary insanity as he ritualistically murdered his mother, which did have some backing, as John had already spent some time at the state asylum in Lexington. Their pleas, however, fell on deaf ears, as the ritual had already been framed as a frenzied religious orgy. John was sentenced to life in prison. 2 other cult members were also given 21 years in prison for aiding and abetting John in his murder of Lucinda. The other cult members were either acquitted or let go free of charge. Of the cult members who testified, many stated that they were against the slaying of Lucinda, but were unable to move and stop John from doing so. Others stated that Lucinda was actually happy and was accepting of her situation, and that she wanted the sacrifice so that way she could help out her son in his time of need. Despite what the cult members stated, the story of Lucinda was quite horrifying, and she never did get to experience the resurrection that John so adamantly proclaimed she would. Which leads us to our next story, which does involve something rising to the heavens in a bright, glowing light.
And we are done with our first set. We have our Harry Potter set officially complete. Pretty cool. It's got a bunch of stuff in the back. A lot of fun details on this one. We have a creator pack and a minifigure. I'm gonna make the spaceship, not like the TIE Fighter spaceship, although that's pretty cool. I'm gonna make the homegrown Earth spaceship.
When most people think about aliens, Area 51 or possibly even Roswell, New Mexico is what comes to mind. But did you know that Michigan is actually ranked in the top 10 for UFO sightings nationwide? Now you do. In 1897, reports of mass hysteria broke loose throughout Michigan as residents claimed to see a cigar-shaped object, much like the Goodyear blimp, flying across the sky. Nearly 60 years after this occurred, an Air Force pilot was scrambled and sent over Lake Superior near the Sulaks due to a strange object flying through the sky. The pilot and plane were never seen from again. Again, in 1966, over the town of Dexter, numerous Michiganders claimed to have saw weird, strange lights flying in the air and descending without any explanation. This was chalked up as swamp gas, but can we really be sure? And last, but certainly not least, comes the story that I wish to share with you today, the story that took place in 1994 over West Michigan. During my research, I discovered that Netflix had actually covered this event in one of their episodes of Unsolved Mysteries. However, what really shocked me was that I had actually already seen this episode and completely forgot. Which you might be thinking, well, if you forgot about it, how interesting could this story be? Well, viewers, that's entirely up to you. Let's begin. On March 8th, 1994, 300 residents, numerous emergency personnel, and even a meteorologist witnessed something unexplainable fly across the western Michigan sky. Residents of West Michigan called their local 911 operators claiming that there were Christmas lights in the sky. Some stated that there were round or cylindrical flying lights over their house. And as someone who spent time living in West Michigan, I can assure you that doesn't happen very often. Now I can report that I too have seen Christmas lights flying through the sky. However, what I saw was actually Starlink, which sent out their first satellites in 2019, which is a little different from 1994, meaning, what the heck were these lights? Many residents who witnessed the lights claimed that it could possibly be northern lights, which do occasionally show up in Michigan. Others stated that maybe it was an unknown military aircraft buzzing the area. However, many, and I mean many, believe that these lights were caused by aliens. Now, just to cut through some of the crap, I think something happened that night. 300 different people called into the police station saying that they saw something. Meteorologists say that they saw something. Police officers also said that they saw something. So, I think something was going on. What that was, obviously, I can't say, but there was definitely something in the air over West Michigan that evening. And although I'm not one to say that I don't believe police officers.
Shots fired! Shots fired! Shots fired! Shots fired!
Well, new tonight, brand new camera video showing the moment an already patted down and handcuffed man was pulled out of a bullet-riddled patrol car. All of this in Okaloosa County.
Yeah, but he was in that patrol car when a deputy mistook a falling acorn for a gunshot.
But what really sold me on this case came from the testimony of meteorologist Jack Bouchon. In 1994, Jack Bouchon was working as a radar operator for the National Weather Service at the Muskegon County Airport. While manually operating the radar like a spotlight, Bouchon was able to pick up on something he couldn't really explain. At this time of night, there weren't any thunderstorms in the general area or anything really of notice whatsoever. Meaning, what could he be seeing on his radar? What could he be picking up? He had no idea. Jack noted that it was impossible for this UAP to be a military aircraft due to the speed that it was flying, which was 72,000 miles per hour, faster than any military aircraft at that time. A year later, in 1995, the Chicago Tribune also published an article saying that numerous other objects such as blimps, small planes, and swamp gas were also canceled out as a potential object that could have been caught on the radar of Jack Bouchon. Regardless of what it was, Jack knew one thing, that it was made out of a metallic substance based on how the radar was bouncing off of it. When Jack was first alerted to this object, it was hanging out above South Haven at around 5,500 feet. That was until it randomly split into 3 different objects. These objects always hung out about 20 miles apart from one another and generally maintained a triangular formation as they moved across the night sky. And although some had played off whatever Bouchon found as ground clutter, Jack noticed that it flew up to 60,000 feet in the air, meaning that it was impossible for it to have been ground clutter. The UAPs that Jack was following could move at a distance of tens of miles at a time, and they quickly made their way over Lake Michigan. As Jack watched these UAPs slowly make their way over Lake Michigan, he noticed something else, something even scarier. There were dozens of other UAPs similar to what he was watching already over Lake Michigan. To make sure that he wasn't crazy, Jack reached out to the FAA controller at the Muskegon County Airport. The controller was able to confirm to Jack that he was in fact not insane, and that they too had witnessed the 3 UAPs that were flying across the sky, although they did say that these things did not have any transpondent codes on them. West Michigan is no stranger to freezing weather, which is one of the reasons why I left. But this March was even colder than normal, as Lake Michigan had completely frozen over. As Bouchon sat in his office that evening, watching the UAPs on his radar, he noticed that they continued to make their way over Lake Michigan until they found a spot that was not actually covered in any ice whatsoever. This suggested to Bouchon that whatever was in these UAPs, or whatever these UAPs were, was most likely looking for water, and they found it. A lot of it. Bouchon stayed a little extra late that evening, continuing to watch the UAPs on his radar, and although most of what he stated is also confirmed by eyewitness testimony of some of the residents in the area, the National Weather Service told him that he wasn't allowed to say any of it. They put the kibosh on him entirely. Jack believed that this was in part due to the National Weather Service wanting to maintain their reputation and not be known as the National UFO Service. Fearing for his job as well as what others in the community might say, Jack did what most people would do in this situation. He shut up. And he shut up for a long time. That was until the government started putting out all the UFO sightings that they've collected over the years. At that point, Jack finally felt that it was okay for him to be able to share his story with everyone. In his story, Jack states that whatever he saw that evening was incredibly advanced technology. Technology that someone wanted to be seen. And seen it was, as one resident named Cindy Pravda stated that she saw 4 weird lights floating over her Grand Haven home. Cindy continued, saying that the 4 lights she witnessed from inside of her house looked like moons that were floating over her residence. Many of the people who saw these lights said that they didn't hear any noise associated with them. This would suggest that whatever was making these lights was most likely not a helicopter or an airplane. It was something else. Another resident, named Holly Groves, claimed that she witnessed what appeared to be slow rotating Christmas lights floating over her backyard. To this day, we still have no idea what was flying over Lake Michigan, and in all honesty, we probably never will, or will at least never have a full understanding of what it was. And with so many of the plausible options already being eliminated, all that's left are really the impossible, which is what's leading many of the residents to believe that it was potentially aliens that they saw over their homes in West Michigan. And honestly, I'm kind of with them. The idea that another country could have this level of sophisticated technology at that point in time, and then today have possibly improved on that technology, is honestly terrifying. So a part of me does hope that it was just a weary traveler looking for a drink of water as they made their way home across the long galaxy. But there are many things in this universe that we can't explain and possibly never will, which leads me to my next story, which involves ghosts.
And the spaceship is now complete. Pretty cool. It's got a little compartment inside. So this thing can fold up. A little bit better than that, but you know, you get the idea.
Mystery figure. We're trying to check out the mystery figure.
Kind of cool. Got some cool little stars on his little plate here. And last, but not least, we have Super Mario Boo's Haunted House. Actually, it's King Boo's Haunted Mansion. So it's right there. Let's get to it.
Whoa. Are you seeing this? Are you getting this? We're not alone. There's definitely something in this room right now. I can feel it! Anyways, let's get to the story. So for my final story that I'm going to share with you all, I just wanted to preface by saying that I didn't see a whole lot of information on it. These are actually really distracting. I'm going to put them away. So for our next and final story, we are going to be going to Washington, D.C. in February of 1926, following a black married couple named John Williams and his wife Anna, who have recently moved into a new house that they have just started renting. This story gave me strong Them vibes. If you haven't seen the Amazon Prime series Them, I would strongly recommend it. It follows a couple from North Carolina who have recently moved to East Compton in 1953 during the Second Great Migration, which I'll probably do a video on later. But it's beyond the scope of the video I'm doing right now. But if you haven't checked it out, I would recommend it. It's pretty good. So anyways, back to the story. So I'm not 100% positive exactly where the couple's from. I did see in the article it say that they did live in South Carolina, but I'm not sure if they're from South Carolina or if they just spent a little bit of time there. But regardless, they are now in Washington, D.C. in a brand new home that they just moved into. Well, the home isn't brand new, but it is brand new to them. You get it, you get it. Despite the couple moving to a new home, probably looking for a fresh start, they actually only managed to stay in this house for 2 weeks before they got the heck out due to all the ghosts they claimed to have been experiencing during their time there. While living in the house, the couple primarily slept on the first floor near the kitchen. Right when they went to bed every night around 8 p.m., they would begin to hear a rapping on the door of the kitchen, as well as other strange noises that would go on throughout the rest of the home. The couple also claimed to hear footsteps coming from the kitchen as well as other parts of the house, as well as kitchen utensils being moved around and other things rustling throughout the night. John would get up occasionally to look to see if anyone broke in or what could be going on and wouldn't find anything. In fact, everything in the house was exactly the same as the way they left it when they went to bed. In an attempt to hide from these noises, the couple would often pull their covers up over their head in an effort to escape whatever could be haunting them. John and Anna both claimed that it got so bad that even their dog would wake up in the middle of the night and make strange, eerie noises at whatever could be walking the halls of their home. Not wanting to be chased out of his own home, John would attempt to try to catch the ghosts by going into whatever room he heard noises in and waiting for them to continue to make whatever sounds they were trying to use to scare him. However, John claimed that whenever he went into one room, he would just start hearing noises coming from a different part of the house altogether. During the 2 weeks that they spent in this home, they decided to do a little investigation on the property and found that 2 murders actually took place there. I was actually able to track down one of the murders that occurred in 1925. They were a married couple called the Crumps. The husband, Mr. Crump, was having a pretty open affair with another girl that I believe was called Stell. He brought her home and they had a few drinks and then he took her out and then he was just gone for a few days. His wife saw all of this, knew what was going on. When he finally came home, he said, "Hey, make me dinner." To which she replied, "No, go get dinner from wherever it is you just spent all those days at." He did not like that answer and began to get physically violent with her. In an act of self-defense, she grabbed his gun and shot him, killing him on the spot. The other murder occurred 6 years before they moved in 1920. This murder involved a man by the name of Slim, at least that's what I found, and just a random woman. I'm not entirely sure who it was, but unfortunately for her, she was killed by Slim. And it was this woman the Williams believed was haunting the halls of the home. Now, John was no stranger to the paranormal. Like I said, he came from South Carolina, and that was mentioned in the story because while he was there was a gate at the place that he was staying that would just randomly swing open from time to time for no real reason. After this went on for some time, John claimed that he grabbed a spade and just started digging up around the area and actually ended up finding a box of money, and after he found it, the gate stopped swinging. This led him to believe that there was probably money buried somewhere on the property, but he wasn't going to look for it this time, and he and his wife, as well as their dog, got out and managed to move into a new place the very next day. But this isn't where the story ends. The day after the Williams family moved out, the Washington Times got a hold of the story and decided to send their reporter, Michael Jones, in to investigate. Michael tried to get a gun for 5 hours before going in after hearing the story as a way of self-defense, but was unfortunately for him unable to get a hold of one. So when Michael could not get a gun after 5 hours, he decided to go to the Williams family and see if they would lend him their dog. He wanted to see if he could replicate the dog barking at any strange noises throughout the night, and he also believed that having the dog around would help him feel a little bit more comfortable in this spooky situation. The Williams family told him no. They're like, we're not letting you take our dog into that spooky place. And honestly, I 100% get it. That would be not something that I would have let happen either. But I do commend him for trying. If I were in his shoes, I would not want to be alone in a potentially haunted house either. After not being able to secure himself a means of any form of self-defense, Michael eventually just gave up and went into the spooky home all by himself. While he was there, he did manage to find a broom that was left over from when the Williams were staying there, which he grabbed onto for all dear life. There were a few other things left in the house, a few different kitchen utensils, some chairs and other little bits of furniture there that the Williams haven't had a chance to move quite out yet, which he did make use of throughout the night. So Michael wasn't entirely alone throughout the night. 2 detectives did show up at one point to do just a small investigation to see whether there were any ghosts or not. There was also a crowd of people that formed outside of the house that came just to help keep him company for a few hours, but all of these guys eventually did leave. And at that point, he was in the house entirely by himself. Around 9:30 at night, Michael was completely alone, completely by himself in this dark, spooky house. Sitting in his solitary room, he started hearing weird murmuring and chattering coming from below him. After about 4 or 5 minutes of hearing this strange noise, he got up and started stomping on the floor and hitting it with his broom. However, it didn't stop. The noises continued for about a few more minutes until they finally started to die down. Right when Michael thought everything was fine, they began once again. This continued for several hours, murmuring and then nothing, chattering and then nothing. Michael was losing his mind. That was until something new started happening in the Williams' old home. As Michael sat there, listening to the murmuring, he started hearing what he described as gumboots, which are basically Wellingtons, continuously walk throughout the kitchen until they stopped, and then he heard what sounded like a scraping noise coming from them as well. Michael decided that he had to check it out. He got up from his chair and went out of the room and over to the kitchen. He took the broom in his hand and poked open the kitchen door to see what might be causing the strange noise. But he didn't see anything. Everything was exactly as it was the last time he was in that room. Michael decided to leave the kitchen and go back to his chair in the other room. That was until he heard a loud crash come from the kitchen area. Michael quickly arose, running for the front door and onto the front steps, until he turned back around to see what may have caused that noise. He couldn't leave just yet. He had a job to do, and he was going to do it. After waiting several seconds outside, he slowly crept his way back into the home, looking back into the kitchen where he heard the crash, only to find a mirror broken on the floor. Michael found this to be particularly odd, because the last time that he saw the mirror, it was securely placed on top of a shelf, unlikely to fall over in any normal circumstance. In an attempt to replicate the situation, Michael found a sign and placed it right exactly where the mirror had been before it had fallen. He went back to his chair in the other room and kept the kitchen door open so that way he could see if anything happened at all to the sign throughout the night. Several minutes had passed and crash! The sign had also fallen to the ground. Michael once again leapt up from his chair, racing to the front door, but this time he didn't leave. He just decided to go back to his chair, in an attempt to fall asleep before daybreak. However, his pipe dream was dashed, as the house had other plans for him. He continued to hear the chattering and the murmuring coming from the floorboards, and he also continued to hear the Wellingtons walking across the kitchen. Unable to fall asleep with all the weird noises going on around him, Michael stayed up all night until the first sign of daylight. Then, Michael did exactly what the Williams had done, and got the heck out of that house. And that was the last thing I could really find on the story. I didn't see a whole lot else. So, I don't know if they ever found a reasonable explanation or not. All that I know is that one family moved in and left after 2 weeks. A reporter came in, he didn't even last the night. Well, I guess he did, but barely. And those are my 3 scary stories. I hope you guys all enjoyed them and didn't get too spooked for Halloween. If you liked it, hit the like button. If you disliked it, feel free to hit the dislike button. Tell me what your favorite story was down in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it. And the rest was history.